When I came home the week before my wedding, my sister met me at the door. Mom and Dad put me in charge while they handle vendors. We need to discuss your behavior. I laughed nervously. What behavior? I just got here. You know what I'm talking about. You're sleeping in my old room. The master guest room isn't for people like you. I pulled out my phone to text my fiancé, but she snatched it away from me. No phone allowed. Mom and Dad's orders. I ran to the house phone and called Mom. She picked up, but immediately said, "Your sister is in charge. Do what she says." I was stunned. How did you know it was about that? She ignored my question. This is for your own good. See you at the ceremony. Dad yelled from the background. We're doing this out of love. Click. They hung up. And before I had time to process, Sister had already changed my carefully planned schedule. Vendor meetings are canceled. You'll use our choices now. What? Those deposits are non-refundable. After what you did 6 months ago, you're lucky there's even a wedding. She checked her watch. Apology letters start now. 50 handwritten cards to guests. I sat at that kitchen table, confused and angry, thinking about 6 months ago. I literally just worked, planned wedding stuff, went to bed early. Nothing happened. When I finished the cards, she inspected them. Dinner is basic chicken and rice. That's all you deserve. She placed the plate down hard. This is insane. My wedding is in 5 days. Shut up! She screamed, throwing my vision board in the trash. You don't get to plan anything anymore. That evening, she made me watch a documentary about relationship honesty. While I watched, my phone buzzed from where she'd locked it in her bag. She checked it and her face darkened. Your bridesmaid Ashley is texting. She says, "Are you really going through with this after the Noah thing?" I had no idea what she was talking about. Noah was my ex from 2 years ago. The next day, I woke to my sister pulling my wedding binder from my hands. You'll deep clean this entire house for your reception. I'm the bride. I have appointments. This is your only appointment. You can clean voluntarily or I can cancel your wedding entirely. Mom gave me the vendor contracts. As I scrubbed floors in my engagement party dress, she insisted. She took photos. Your fiancé's family wants documentation of remorse. She aimed her phone at me like I was some kind of criminal. My maid of honor texted and Sister read it aloud. Tell her we all saw the live stream, but we support her anyway. I never did any live stream. I barely used Instagram. That evening, she made me watch my fiancé's proposal video on repeat. Notice how you flinch when he kneels? Your body language says everything. I was surprised. It was romantic. Denial is expected. Everyone saw how you really felt that night. She pulled out her phone and recorded me crying. His family wants to see real emotion. But my fiancé still brought me coffee every morning and said he loved me. Something wasn't adding up. The next morning, she woke me by cutting my hair. Just a trim. Brides who settle don't deserve long hair. She took 4 inches off while I sobbed. Made me call my fiancé and tell him 3 things I love about him while she listened. Make it convincing or the wedding's off. My fiancé's brother managed to pull me aside at the venue walkthrough. Dude, my mom is freaking out. She wants to know if you're really over Noah. I've been over Noah. Suddenly my sister appeared. That's another night on the couch. No talking to his family. That afternoon, she pulled out printed screenshots. Instagram live transcripts with my profile picture. Just need to vent. He's nice, but he's not Noah. Noah had passion. This is just safe. I'm almost 30, so whatever. That's not, I would never. But looking at the timestamp, Saturday night, I remembered drinking wine, crying about something. Noah had just gotten engaged that week. But I was alone in my apartment. 13 viewers say otherwise. Sister pulled up more screenshots, including his parents, his boss, your entire guest list. Everything clicked. I had been drunk, crying about Noah's engagement. Must have hit live instead of stories. Poured my heart out to what I thought was nobody. Getting married because it's time. He'll never excite me like Noah did. Maybe you can learn to love someone. Oh my God, I failed every test. That's why everyone's been... So here's what happens now, Sister interrupted, pulling out her phone. The wedding is in 2 days. His family wanted him to leave you. He refused. Said you deserved a chance to confess. You never did. But then she smiled strangely. Actually, there's been a development. She opened the front door. Noah stood there with flowers. We flew him in this morning. He has something to tell you. I froze in the doorway, staring at Noah holding a bunch of supermarket roses like this was some kind of normal social visit. My sister stood behind me with her arms crossed, watching my face like she was waiting for me to cry or scream or prove something. The fiancé's brother shifted his weight near the porch steps, looking at his shoes instead of at any of us. Noah wore a button-down shirt I'd never seen before, and his hair was shorter than I remembered. He looked older, more tired around the eyes. My sister nudged me forward and I stumbled onto the porch, my hand grabbing the doorframe to steady myself. Noah held out the flowers and I just stared at them, not taking them, because what was I supposed to do with flowers from my ex who my sister apparently flew across the country as some kind of intervention prop? My sister cleared her throat loudly and Noah lowered the flowers, looking uncomfortable. He glanced at my sister, then back at me, and I saw something silver catch the light on his left hand. A ring. He was wearing a wedding ring. Not a wedding ring. An engagement ring. But still, a ring that meant he belonged to someone else now. My brain couldn't process why he was here if he was engaged to someone else. My sister spoke first, her voice sharp and pleased with herself. She explained that she'd contacted Noah 2 weeks ago and told him I was having some kind of breakdown about our past relationship. She said she'd paid for his flight and his hotel because I needed closure before the wedding. Noah cut in quickly, his voice calm and measured in a way that made him sound like a completely different person from the guy I remembered. He explained that my sister had made it sound like I'd specifically asked to see him, that I was questioning everything about my engagement and needed to talk to him before making a huge mistake. I felt my face get hot with embarrassment and anger. I looked at the fiancé's brother and he was staring at my sister like he'd just realized she was completely out of control. Noah kept talking, explaining that he's been engaged for 6 months now to someone named Jessica, who he met at work about a year ago. He said he'd been hesitant to come, but my sister had sent him screenshots of my Instagram livestream and convinced him I was spiraling and needed help. The way he said it, so calm and reasonable, hit me harder than I expected. Not because I wanted him back, or because I was jealous of his engagement, but because it made me realize how much time I'd spent thinking about him when he'd clearly moved on and built a whole new life. My sister pushed past me and gestured for everyone to come inside. She announced that we were all going to sit in the living room and have a mediated conversation where Noah could tell me what I needed to hear. I wanted to run to my car and drive away, but my car keys were in my purse and my purse was in my old bedroom, and my sister still had my phone locked in her bag. It was 9 at night in my parents' neighborhood where I didn't know anyone anymore, and I had nowhere to go. Noah followed my sister inside, still holding the stupid flowers. The fiancé's brother touched my elbow gently and whispered that he didn't know this was happening, that his family just wanted me to be honest about the live stream. I nodded but couldn't speak because my throat felt tight and my face was burning. We all filed into the living room where my sister had apparently set up for this ambush. She'd arranged the furniture so the couch faced 2 chairs, like some kind of therapy setup. She pointed at the couch and told Noah and me to sit there. She took one chair and gestured for the fiancé's brother to take the other, but he stayed standing near the doorway like he was ready to leave. My sister pulled out her phone and started recording. She said this was for my own good and for my fiancé's family to see that I was finally facing reality. I sat on the far end of the couch, as far from Noah as possible. He set the flowers on the coffee table and rubbed his hands on his jeans. My sister launched into this whole speech about how I'd been living in fantasy and romanticizing my past and refusing to accept that I'd made a mistake getting engaged. Noah interrupted her and said that wasn't why he came. He said he came because he thought I needed help, not because he wanted to get back together or thought I should leave my fiancé. My sister's face tightened, but she told him to continue. Noah turned to look at me directly for the first time and started talking about our relationship 2 years ago. He said it was intense and unstable and fueled by constant drama that felt exciting at the time, but was actually just exhausting. He talked about how we'd fight and break up and get back together in this endless cycle that made both of us miserable. He said he's happier now in a calmer relationship with Jessica, where they actually communicate instead of just reacting to each other. He said exciting isn't the same as healthy, and passion isn't the same as compatibility. Hearing him say all of this out loud, in this calm and clear way, made something click in my head. I'd been remembering our relationship like it was this great love story that I'd lost, but really it had been chaos and anxiety and constantly wondering if we were okay. I'd been romanticizing the drama and mistaking it for real connection. Noah finished talking and sat back, looking at my sister like he was waiting for her approval. I found my voice finally, and told him I was sorry he got dragged into this circus. I asked him directly if he came here hoping we'd get back together. He looked genuinely surprised and said no, absolutely not. He said my sister had made it sound like I was having a breakdown, and specifically asked to see him, that she'd sent him messages saying I was confused about my feelings and needed closure. My sister jumped in immediately and said Noah was lying to protect himself. She pulled out a stack of printed papers from the side table and spread them on the coffee table. They were screenshots of text messages between her and Noah. I leaned forward and read them, my hands shaking. She'd told him I was questioning my engagement and comparing my fiancé to him constantly. She'd said I'd mentioned his name multiple times in therapy sessions that didn't exist. She'd told him I was making a huge mistake and only he could help me see clearly. Noah picked up the papers and his face changed as he read. His jaw got tight and his eyes narrowed. He looked at my sister and said she'd manipulated him. He said she'd made it sound like I was in crisis and he was the only person who could help, when really she was just trying to blow up my wedding. The fiancé's brother finally spoke up from his spot by the doorway. He said his family didn't know anything about this Noah ambush. He pulled out his phone and showed me a family group chat where his mom was asking why Noah was suddenly involved and expressing serious concern about my sister's methods. His dad had written that this seemed inappropriate, and they just wanted me to be honest about the live stream, not stage some kind of intervention with my ex. Noah stood up abruptly, the flowers falling off the coffee table onto the floor. He said this whole thing was inappropriate and he wasn't participating in whatever game my sister was playing. He walked toward the door and the fiancé's brother stepped aside to let him pass. Before he left, Noah turned back and looked at me. He said the live stream had hurt Jessica's feelings when someone sent it to her, and he asked me to please be more careful about other people's lives when I was processing my own feelings. Then he was gone, the front door closing behind him. My sister sat in her chair looking less confident than before, her phone still recording. I stood up and turned on her, my voice shaking with anger. I asked her what she thought that stunt would accomplish besides humiliating me even more than I already was. She insisted she was trying to make me face reality so I'd stop living in fantasy, but her voice wavered like she wasn't sure anymore. She said I needed to see Noah in person to realize he'd moved on, and I was holding on to nothing. The fiancé's brother walked over and gently pulled me aside, away from my sister's recording phone. He said quietly that his brother, my fiancé, was staying at their parents' house and refusing to come to the wedding unless I actually talked to him honestly, not through my sister's filter. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket with a phone number written on it. He said it was his brother's new temporary number since my phone was still taken away. He folded the paper into my hand and told me to call him tonight. That his brother loved me but couldn't marry me if I wasn't being truthful with myself or with him. I grabbed the house phone off the coffee table and punched in the number his brother gave me. My sister moved closer, positioning herself where she could hear everything, and I turned my back to her but she just circled around. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up and his voice sounded rough like he hadn't slept much. He said my name like a question, and I could hear traffic noise in the background like he was driving somewhere. I told him it was me and asked if he was okay, and he let out this long breath before saying he loved me, but he couldn't marry me in 3 days if I was still lying to myself about what I really wanted. He suggested we seriously think about postponing the wedding, and my chest got tight because hearing him say it out loud made it real. My sister's eyes lit up like she'd won something, and she pulled out her phone to record this conversation too. My fiancé kept talking and explained that his parents were upset and confused about everything, and his boss had seen the live stream somehow and made weird comments at work all week. He said our wedding had turned into something stressful instead of joyful, and he was tired of feeling like he was fighting for a relationship by himself. Then he asked me straight out if I actually wanted to marry him, or if I was just going through with the wedding because we'd already planned everything and paid deposits. His voice cracked a little on that last part, and I realized how much damage I'd done with that stupid drunken live stream. I could hear him waiting for an answer, and my sister leaned in closer with her phone still recording, and I wanted to throw something at her. I told him the truth right there with my sister listening to every word. I said I'd been drunk and sad that night because I saw Noah's engagement announcement pop up on my feed, and I said stupid things I didn't mean, but I really did love him and wanted to marry him. The words came out fast and messy, and my voice shook, but I kept going. I explained that I wasn't still in love with Noah. I was just scared about getting older, and worried that choosing a stable relationship meant giving up excitement or passion or something. He stayed quiet for a long time after I finished talking, and I could hear him breathing and the traffic sounds and my own heart beating too loud. Finally, he said we needed to figure out if what I just told him was really true, or if I was just saying what he wanted to hear because I was cornered. He said he wanted to believe me, but he'd spent 6 months watching me avoid this conversation, and he didn't know what was real anymore. We talked for another 10 minutes and agreed that we both needed time to think clearly without my sister running everything like some kind of prison warden. He said he'd support whatever decision I made about the wedding timeline, and he wasn't trying to punish me or make me prove anything. Before we hung up, he told me he wasn't going anywhere. He just needed to know I was choosing him for the right reasons, and not because I was almost 30 and felt like I should settle down. He said to call him tomorrow after I'd had time to think, and we could figure out next steps together. When I put the phone down, my hands were shaking, and my sister immediately started talking about how that call proved I needed her intervention. I spun around and told her to give me my phone back right now. I said her so-called intervention had made everything worse, and she'd lost any right to control my life or my wedding. She crossed her arms and said Mom and Dad put her in charge until after the ceremony, and she was going to see this through whether I liked it or not. Something snapped in me, and I pushed past her and marched down the hallway to my parents' bedroom. I banged on their door hard enough that my knuckles hurt and kept banging until I heard my dad yell that they were sleeping. I yelled back that I didn't care, and they needed to come out right now because this had gone too far. The door opened, and both my parents stood there looking annoyed and half asleep in their pajamas. Dad started to say something about respecting their rest, but I cut him off and told them everything in one long rush. I described the ambush with Noah, how my sister manipulated both of us with fake texts, how my fiancé was ready to postpone the wedding because this whole situation had become a nightmare. I told them about her taking my phone for days and making me scrub floors and cutting my hair and recording me crying. Mom's face changed as I talked, and she looked at my sister who had followed me down the hallway. Dad tried to defend my sister and said she was just trying to help me face reality, but Mom held up her hand and told him to stop. She said maybe they'd given my sister too much authority over this situation. Mom sat down on the edge of their bed and admitted they'd asked my sister to handle things because they were embarrassed about the live stream and didn't know what to do when my fiancé's parents called them upset. She said they thought my sister's tough love approach would snap me out of denial and make me deal with my feelings honestly. Her voice got quieter when she said they didn't authorize bringing Noah here or taking my phone away for multiple days, and she looked genuinely shocked when I described everything that had been happening. She asked my sister if all of that was true, and my sister's face went red and she started crying. My sister broke down right there in the hallway and said between sobs that she was trying to protect me from making the same mistake she made years ago. She revealed that she got divorced 2 years ago after finally admitting to herself that she'd settled for someone she wasn't sure about. She said she'd ignored her doubts and married him anyway because she thought she was supposed to, and then she spent 5 years in a marriage that felt wrong before she finally got the courage to leave. She looked at me with tears running down her face and said she couldn't stand watching me do the same thing to myself. She said every time she saw me talking about my fiancé the way I used to talk about Noah, she saw herself making that same terrible choice all over again. I felt a quick flash of sympathy for my sister's pain, because I hadn't known about her divorce or how much she'd struggled with it. But I told her my situation wasn't the same as hers, and she couldn't project her regrets onto my life like this. I said I understood she was trying to help, but she'd crossed so many lines and made choices for me that weren't hers to make. Mom agreed and told my sister she needed to give me back my phone and step back from managing this situation. My sister pulled my phone out of her bag slowly and handed it to me, but she said quietly that she still thought I was making a mistake and rushing into a marriage I wasn't ready for. I took the phone and told her that was my mistake to make, not hers. I turned my phone back on and watched it light up with notification after notification. There were dozens of messages from worried friends asking if I was okay and where I'd been. My maid of honor had sent 5 texts asking if I needed her to come get me and saying she was concerned. Several emails from vendors popped up asking for confirmation on final details and last-minute decisions. The wedding was in 3 days, and I had absolutely no idea if it was actually happening anymore. I scrolled through my texts first and found messages from vendors asking about final counts and setup times. My florist wanted to confirm the bouquet delivery window. The photographer needed to know if we were doing a first look. The caterer had questions about the vegetarian meal count. I sat on the edge of my parents' bed and felt the weight of everything that needed decisions right now. My sister stood in the doorway watching me, but I ignored her and opened my contacts to find Rhiannon's number. It was almost 10 at night, but I called anyway because I couldn't wait until morning. She answered on the 3rd ring and her voice was professional, but warm when she said hello. I explained that we might need to postpone the wedding because of family circumstances, and I heard her typing on her computer. She asked me to hold on while she pulled up our contract, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. When she came back, she said she understood these things happen, and she wanted to review our options with me. She asked if I had a moment to go through the details, and I said yes, even though my sister was still standing there staring at me. Rhiannon explained that postponing this close to our date would cost us about 40% of our total deposits, which came to around $6,000. She said she could hold a new date for us in 4 to 6 months if we decided within the next 48 hours. Her voice got a little quieter when she mentioned she'd heard some talk among the vendors about our situation, but she wanted me to know everyone just wanted us to be happy. I felt my face get hot knowing that wedding vendors were gossiping about my live stream. Rhiannon quickly added that it was nothing bad, and people understood that relationships have challenges. She said the most important thing was making sure we were ready, and not rushing into something we'd regret. The reality of losing $6,000 hit me hard, and I told her I needed to think about it. She said she completely understood, but then she said something that stuck with me. She told me $6,000 was still cheaper than going through with a wedding we weren't ready for, and possibly getting divorced later. She said she'd seen couples push through problems to avoid losing deposits, and then they ended up spending way more on divorce lawyers a few years down the road. Her practical perspective made it feel less like an emotional crisis, and more like a financial decision. I thanked her and promised to call back within 2 days with our answer. After I hung up, I sat there doing math in my head about what $6,000 meant for our savings. My sister finally left the doorway and I heard her go downstairs. I opened my text messages and found Drew's number. I typed out a message asking if he could help me access my Instagram archive to see the actual live stream that apparently ruined my life. He responded within 2 minutes saying he could definitely help and asking when I needed him. I told him as soon as possible and he said he'd come over tomorrow afternoon with his laptop. I felt relieved that at least one person wasn't treating me like a criminal. Drew had always been straightforward and helpful without making things weird. I texted him my parents' address and he sent back a thumbs up. The next morning, I woke up early and avoided my sister by staying in my room until I heard her car leave. Mom knocked on my door around 9 and asked if I wanted breakfast. I came downstairs and found Dad reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. Neither of them mentioned the phone call with Rhiannon or asked about the wedding. We ate toast and eggs in uncomfortable silence until Dad finally said they supported whatever decision I made about postponing. Mom nodded but didn't look at me. I went back upstairs and waited for Drew to arrive. He showed up right at 2 in the afternoon carrying his laptop bag and a coffee for me. He gave me a quick hug and followed me up to my room without asking a bunch of questions about what was going on. He sat at my desk and opened his laptop while I sat on the bed. He walked me through how to download my complete Instagram data, including any live stream video files. He said it would take about 20 minutes for the download to process. While we waited, he pulled up some settings and showed me how to make my account completely private and turn off the live stream feature entirely. He said I should probably do that after I watched the video so this couldn't happen again. I agreed and felt stupid that I hadn't thought to check my settings before. Drew looked at me and said in a really calm voice that he'd found a screen recording someone made of my live stream. He said it got shared in a private group chat that included some of our mutual friends. He told me it wasn't public or viral, but he estimated about 30 people had probably seen it beyond the original 13 viewers. He said most of it spread through wedding guest gossip chains where people were forwarding it to each other. I felt sick knowing that 30 people watched me drunk and crying and saying terrible things about my fiancé. Drew quickly added that he didn't watch the whole thing and he wasn't judging me. He said everyone has moments they're not proud of and the internet just makes those moments harder to escape. The download finished and he showed me where to find the video file. He asked if I wanted him to stay while I watched it, but I told him I needed to do this alone. He understood and stood up to leave. Before he walked out, he squeezed my shoulder and told me to text him if I needed anything. I listened to his footsteps go down the stairs and heard the front door close. Then I was alone with my laptop and the video file that apparently destroyed my wedding. I called my parents before I watched the video because I needed to understand why they gave my sister so much power over my life. Mom answered and I asked them both to come to my room. They came upstairs looking worried, and I asked them straight out why they let my sister take control of everything. Dad sat on the edge of my bed and said they panicked when my fiancé's parents called them upset about the live stream. He said they didn't know what to do, and when my sister offered to handle things, they thought it would show everyone they were taking it seriously. He used the phrase handling it responsibly like this was some kind of PR crisis. I asked why they didn't just talk to me directly, and Mom looked down at her hands. She said my sister volunteered to manage everything, and convinced them I was in denial about my feelings. She said my sister told them I needed tough intervention, or I'd ruin my life by marrying someone I didn't really love. Mom's voice got quieter when she admitted they should have talked to me instead of letting my sister take over. She apologized for making me feel abandoned and controlled. I could tell she meant it, but I was still angry that they believed my sister over me. Dad tried to defend their choice by saying they were scared and confused, and my sister seemed so sure about what needed to happen. Before I could respond, my sister appeared in the doorway. She must have come home while Drew was here and heard us talking. Her face was red and she looked like she might cry. She said she was genuinely trying to prevent me from ruining my life the way she ruined hers. Then she told us something I didn't know. She said she got divorced 2 years ago after finally admitting she married someone she wasn't sure about. She said she ignored her doubts and went through with the wedding because she thought she was supposed to. She spent 5 years in a marriage that felt wrong before she finally left. Her voice broke when she said she couldn't stand watching me make the same mistake. She said every time she saw me talking about my fiancé the way I used to talk about Noah, she saw herself making that terrible choice all over again. I felt a quick flash of sympathy because I had no idea she'd been divorced or struggled like that. But I told her my situation wasn't the same as hers, and she couldn't project her regrets onto my life. Mom agreed and told my sister she needed to step back and let me make my own choices, even if they were mistakes. My sister stood there crying and said quietly that she still thought I was rushing into something I wasn't ready for. I told her that was my choice to make and she needed to respect that. The room got quiet and uncomfortable until my sister finally left. I turned to my parents after my sister left and told them I needed to set a clear boundary. I explained that my sister could come to my wedding as a guest if and when it happened, but she was done making any decisions about my life or my wedding. Mom nodded slowly and said she understood, and Dad looked relieved like he'd been waiting for someone to take control back. I asked them to tell my sister directly that her involvement was over and they both agreed. Mom squeezed my hand before they left my room, and I heard them go downstairs to talk to my sister. I sat on my bed and stared at my laptop where the video file was waiting. My phone buzzed with a text from my fiancé asking if I was okay, but I didn't respond yet because I needed to watch the live stream first. I opened my laptop and found the video file that Drew had helped me download. The thumbnail showed my face looking messy and red from crying. I pressed play and immediately wanted to stop because seeing myself drunk and crying was horrible. The video quality was grainy but clear enough to see everything. I was sitting on my couch in my apartment wearing an old t-shirt and holding a wine glass. My voice sounded slurred when I started talking to the camera. I said something about needing to vent, and then launched into talking about Noah's engagement announcement that I'd just seen on Instagram. I watched myself cry and say that Noah was getting married to someone perfect, and I was jealous. Then I started talking about my fiancé and my stomach dropped. I heard myself say he was nice and stable, but not exciting like Noah was. I said Noah had passion and fire and my fiancé was just safe. The worst part came when I admitted I was almost 30, so I guess it was time to settle down and marry someone reliable even if he didn't make my heart race. I said maybe you could learn to love someone the right way over time. I watched myself take another drink of wine and wipe my eyes. The video lasted almost 8 minutes and I sat through every awful second of it. When it ended, I just stared at the black screen feeling sick. I couldn't deny what I'd said or pretend it didn't mean anything, because there it was in my own words. I had to admit that 6 months ago when I was drunk and emotional, I did have doubts about my engagement. I did compare my fiancé to Noah and worry that choosing stability meant giving up excitement. But watching it now, I could see something else too. I was confusing drama with love and chaos with passion. Noah and I had fights and breakups and intense makeups that felt exciting but were actually just exhausting and unhealthy. My fiancé treated me with respect and consistency, and I'd somehow decided that meant boring. I closed my laptop and picked up my phone to call him. He answered on the second ring and asked if I was alright. I told him I'd watched the live stream and I understood why he was hurt and why his family was worried about us getting married. He didn't say anything, so I kept going. I admitted that I did have doubts 6 months ago when I made that video, and I explained that I'd been romanticizing my relationship with Noah instead of seeing it clearly. I told him I was wrong to compare them and wrong to think that drama equaled passion. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished talking, he was quiet for a moment. Then he asked me what I wanted to do about the wedding that was supposed to happen in 3 days. I took a deep breath and told him I thought we should postpone it. I explained that it wasn't because I didn't want to marry him, but because we both deserved to start our marriage from a place of confidence instead of damage control. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. He said quietly that he was hoping I would say that because he felt the same way. He suggested we postpone for 4 months and go to couples counseling to rebuild trust between us. He said he wanted to plan a smaller wedding that was actually about us instead of performing for everyone else. I felt relief wash over me because he wasn't angry or rejecting me. He was being honest about what we both needed. We talked for over an hour about what postponing would mean in practical terms. We discussed telling all our guests and losing our deposits on vendors and dealing with disappointed family members. I mentioned that my parents had contributed money, and his parents had paid for the rehearsal dinner, and we'd have to figure out the financial mess. He said his brother could help us coordinate with his side of the family, and we could split the task of notifying everyone. We agreed to present the postponement as a joint decision that we were both making together, not me being punished or him being uncertain about marrying me. He said he would call the venue coordinator tomorrow to see if we could lock in a new date and find out what deposits we could transfer. I asked him if he was sure about this, and he said yes without hesitation. He told me he loved me and wanted to marry me, but he wanted us both to be completely sure and honest with each other first. Before we hung up, he said he'd come by tomorrow, so we could work on the guest notification together. I spent the rest of the evening drafting a message to send to everyone invited to our wedding. I wrote and deleted probably 10 versions before I got it right. I explained that we were postponing our wedding to take time for premarital counseling after some personal challenges we'd been working through. I kept it brief and honest without sharing details about the live stream or family drama. I apologized for any inconvenience or travel arrangements people had already made. I promised we'd send out new information once we had a confirmed date. I showed the draft to my fiancé over text, and he approved it with a few small changes. The next morning, I woke up early and sent the message to our entire guest list through email and text. My phone started buzzing immediately with responses. My maid of honor called within 10 minutes and told me she was proud of me for being honest and brave. She admitted she'd been worried I was rushing into the wedding to avoid dealing with my feelings, and she was relieved we were taking time to do things right. She offered to help with anything we needed and said she'd be there when we rescheduled. Other messages started coming in throughout the morning. Most people were supportive and understanding. Several friends sent encouraging texts saying they respected our decision. A few relatives sent passive-aggressive messages about wasted money and embarrassment. My aunt texted asking if this meant we were breaking up, and my uncle sent a long message about commitment and following through on promises. But then my fiancé's mom sent a thoughtful email that made me cry. She said she respected our decision to postpone and she was glad we were prioritizing our relationship over the wedding event. She offered to help us find a good couples therapist and said she'd always believed we were right for each other. She ended the email by saying she looked forward to celebrating with us when we were both ready. I spent the rest of that day searching for therapists my insurance would cover and finally found one with an opening the next afternoon. I booked it immediately and felt a small bit of relief knowing I'd have professional help sorting through this mess. The next day, I drove to her office in a strip mall near the highway and sat in the waiting room filling out intake forms about my mental health history and what brought me in today. When she called me back, I followed her to a small office with 2 chairs and a box of tissues on the side table. She introduced herself and asked me to explain what was going on, so I told her everything starting with the drunk live stream 6 months ago and ending with the postponement decision we'd just made. She listened without interrupting and took notes on her tablet while I talked. When I finished, she asked me some questions about how I usually handle difficult emotions and whether I had a pattern of avoiding hard conversations. I admitted that yeah, I tend to either shut down completely or make impulsive decisions when I'm stressed or drunk, and I don't always deal with my feelings in healthy ways. She nodded like she'd heard this before and said, avoidance is a common coping mechanism, but it usually makes problems worse in the long run. She gave me some specific tools to try when I feel overwhelmed, including a breathing technique and a journaling exercise where I write out my actual feelings before I act on them. She also suggested I stop drinking alcohol for a while since it clearly lowered my judgment and led to the live stream disaster. We scheduled weekly appointments for the next month, and I left feeling like maybe I could actually work through this stuff instead of just letting it control me. That evening, I drove to my parents' house because I needed to have a real conversation with my sister without all the chaos and punishment. She was in the kitchen when I arrived and looked surprised to see me. I asked if we could talk privately, and she led me to the back porch where we sat on the old wicker furniture. I took a breath and told her I understood she was trying to help in her own way, but I needed her to stop trying to manage my entire life. She immediately got defensive and said she was just trying to prevent me from making the same mistakes she did. I stayed calm and told her my situation wasn't the same as hers, and I needed to make my own choices even if they turned out to be mistakes. She argued for a few minutes about how I was being naive and how she could see things I couldn't see, but then her voice got quieter and she admitted she probably went too far with the whole Noah ambush thing. She said she just couldn't stand watching me settle for someone when she knew what that felt like, and how much it hurt later. I told her I appreciated that she cared, but I needed her to respect my boundaries and trust me to figure out my own relationship. She was quiet for a long time, and then finally said she'd try to back off and let me handle things my way. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it felt like a start. The next morning, I met with both my parents at their house and told them we needed to clear the air about everything that had happened. Mom made coffee and we sat at the dining room table where I'd written all those apology cards under my sister's watch. I asked them directly why they gave my sister so much power over my wedding and my life when I'm a grown adult. Dad started to explain about how embarrassed they were after the live stream, and how they didn't know what to do. Mom cut in and said they were wrong to let my sister take over like that, and they should have protected me from her overreach instead of enabling it. She apologized for making me feel abandoned and controlled during what should have been a happy time. Dad added that he felt terrible about how things had spiraled, and he wanted to help fix the financial mess from postponing. He said since they'd contributed money to the original wedding and some of the chaos was their fault, he'd help cover part of the postponement costs. I told him I appreciated the offer, but I didn't expect them to pay for my mistakes. He insisted, though, and said he'd transfer $3,000 to help with the lost deposits. I thanked them both and told them I just needed them to support my decisions going forward, instead of letting my sister call the shots. They agreed and promised to respect my boundaries with my sister and with my relationship. 2 days later, my fiancé and I drove to the wedding venue to meet with Rhiannon and finalize everything about the postponement. She greeted us warmly in the lobby and led us to her office where she had our contract pulled up on her computer. She walked us through exactly what we were losing financially and what would carry over to a new date. The venue deposit would transfer completely, but we'd lose the catering deposit of $4,000 since they needed more notice for cancellations. The photographer could move to a new date, but we'd lose the engagement session fee of $500. The florist would keep their deposit of $1,200. She pulled up her calendar and showed us available dates over the next 6 months. We chose a Saturday in 4 months that worked for both of us, and she marked it as held pending our final confirmation. She explained we'd need to confirm within a week and put down a new deposit to secure that date. My fiancé squeezed my hand under the table and told Rhiannon we'd confirm by the end of the week. She smiled and said she was glad we were taking time to make sure we were ready, and that she'd seen too many couples rush into weddings they weren't prepared for. Her kindness made me feel less ashamed about the whole situation. That afternoon, while I was driving home, my phone buzzed with a text from Noah. I pulled over to read it because I didn't want to be distracted while driving. His message was brief and said he was sorry he got pulled into my family drama, and he wished me and my fiancé genuine happiness. He asked me not to contact him again out of respect for his fiancé, and said he hoped I understood. I typed back a quick response saying I completely understood, and I apologized for any hurt the live stream had caused his fiancé. I told him I didn't need closure from him because I realized I needed clarity with myself instead. He sent back a thumbs up emoji, and that was it. I felt a weird sense of finality about the whole Noah chapter of my life, and it was honestly a relief to have it actually closed instead of living in some fantasy version of what could have been. That evening, I called my fiancé and told him officially that I wanted to postpone the wedding and work on our relationship through counseling. He let out this long breath like he'd been holding it in and said he was relieved I'd made that decision. We talked about spending the next few months rebuilding trust and addressing my tendency to avoid hard conversations instead of dealing with them directly. He said he wanted to make sure we were both choosing each other clearly and not just going through the motions because we'd already planned a wedding. I told him I was all in on doing the work, and he said he was too. Before we hung up, he said he loved me and he believed we could get to a place where we both felt confident and excited about getting married. The next day, his brother called me and offered to help coordinate logistics with their side of the family. He said he'd already talked to his parents and they were on board with the postponement and wanted to support us. He set up a shared calendar for our couple's therapy appointments so everyone could see we were taking this seriously. Before he hung up, he told me privately that his brother had always loved me, but he needed to know I was all in, and not just going along with plans because they were already made. He said seeing me take accountability and make hard choices had actually made their whole family respect me more. That conversation meant a lot because I'd been worried his family would hate me forever after the live stream. My fiancé and I spent the next few days drafting a joint email to all our wedding guests explaining the postponement. We went through probably 15 versions before we got the tone right. We explained that we were postponing our wedding to take time for premarital counseling after some personal challenges we'd been working through. We kept it honest but brief without going into details about the live stream or family drama. We apologized for any inconvenience or travel arrangements people had already made and promised to send new information once we had a confirmed date. We took equal responsibility in the message and emphasized that we were doing this to strengthen our relationship, not because we were unsure about each other. We sent it out on a Wednesday morning and responses started coming in within hours. Most people were supportive and said they respected our decision. A few disappointed relatives sent messages about wasted money and how embarrassing this was, but our close friends were really understanding. My maid of honor sent a long text saying she was proud of us for being brave enough to pause instead of rushing forward. Later that week, we met with Rhiannon again to officially lock in our new wedding date for 4 months out. She applied our existing venue deposit to the new date and explained exactly what we'd lost in non-transferable costs. We were losing about $6,000 total between the catering deposit, photographer fees, and florist deposit. It hurt to lose that much money, but we both agreed it was worth it to make sure we were getting married for the right reasons. Rhiannon had us sign new contracts for the new date, and she seemed genuinely happy that we were taking time to get things right. That weekend, I listed my original wedding dress for sale online because every time I looked at it, I felt sick remembering all the chaos and control and crying. I sold it at a loss for about half what I paid, but I didn't care. I wanted to start fresh with planning a smaller, more meaningful ceremony that actually reflected who we were as a couple. My fiancé and I sat down together and talked about what we actually wanted for the wedding instead of what we thought we were supposed to want. We agreed on a guest list of 50 people instead of 150, cutting out all the distant relatives and obligation invites. We decided to focus on people who actually supported us and knew us well instead of trying to impress everyone. 2 days after we sent the postponement email, I called a family meeting at my parents' house with everyone present, including my sister. I sat at the dining table and laid out exactly how things would work going forward. My sister could attend the rescheduled wedding as a regular guest with no special role or authority over any decisions. Mom and Dad both nodded and agreed they would respect my boundaries and stop letting my sister control my life choices. My sister sat there with her arms crossed looking angry, but she didn't argue during the meeting. That evening, she sent me a text message that said she may have overstepped in some areas, and she hoped I would still want her at the wedding. It wasn't a real apology, but it was probably the closest I would ever get from her. The next morning, my sister asked if we could talk privately in the backyard. We sat on the patio furniture, and she admitted she had projected her own failed marriage onto my situation, because watching me plan a wedding brought back painful memories. She specifically apologized for orchestrating the Noah ambush, and said that was wrong regardless of her intentions. I told her I forgave her for the Noah thing, but I needed her to trust me to make my own mistakes without her interference. She agreed, and said she would start going to therapy herself to work through her divorce trauma that she'd been ignoring for 2 years. I packed up my stuff from my parents' house that afternoon and moved back to my own apartment. The first thing I did was open my phone and change every single social media privacy setting I could find. I made my Instagram completely private and deleted the live streaming feature entirely. Drew came over later with his laptop and helped me set up two-factor authentication on all my accounts. He showed me how to enable alerts for any login attempts and how to review which devices had access to my accounts. We spent 2 hours going through every security setting to make sure I could never accidentally broadcast my private moments to the world again. My fiancé moved his clothes and toiletries to his brother's place temporarily so we could have space while doing therapy. We weren't breaking up, but we both agreed we needed to work on ourselves separately before living together again. We set up clear communication guidelines that included daily text check-ins and weekly video calls that weren't mediated by any family members. His brother helped us create a shared calendar with all our individual therapy appointments and couples sessions marked clearly. In our second therapy session the following week, the therapist helped us dig into my fear that choosing safe and stable meant I was settling for boring and passionless. She gave us homework to each write down what genuine passion looks like in a healthy relationship versus what toxic intensity looks like disguised as passion. My fiancé shared that he had felt like I was always comparing him to some perfect version of my ex in my head, and he could never measure up. Hearing him say that out loud helped me understand how deeply the live stream had hurt him beyond just the embarrassment. The therapist made us practice having hard conversations where we each stated our needs clearly, without attacking the other person. My maid of honor drove 3 hours to visit me the following Saturday. We sat in my living room with coffee and had a really honest conversation about her concerns before the live stream incident happened. She admitted she had worried I was settling when I got engaged, but she didn't know how to bring it up without sounding unsupportive. She said some of my comments about the wedding planning had seemed disconnected, like I was going through motions. We agreed we needed to be more direct with each other going forward, even when the truth was uncomfortable to hear. She promised to call me out if she ever saw me making choices that seemed wrong for me. My parents invited both my fiancé and me to dinner at their house 2 weeks after the postponement without my sister present. They apologized directly to him for all the chaos and for not protecting our relationship from my sister's control. Dad told him they should have talked to me first instead of authorizing my sister to take over everything. He offered again to help cover some of the postponement costs, and my fiancé graciously accepted a contribution of $3,000 toward the new venue date. Mom hugged both of us and said she was proud we were doing the hard work instead of pretending everything was fine. I got a text from Noah the next day. He said he wished us well, and he was blocking my number at his fiancé's request, which I completely understood and respected. He said he hoped I found the happiness I was looking for, and he was sorry things got so complicated. Reading his message, I realized I didn't feel sad about losing contact with him. I actually felt relieved to have that chapter of my life definitively closed with no possibility of future contact. I sat down and wrote a genuine apology letter to my fiancé's parents explaining the whole situation. I told them the live stream happened during a moment of drunken anxiety when I saw Noah's engagement announcement, and I took full responsibility for the hurt and confusion I had caused their family. I didn't make excuses or blame the alcohol. I just owned what I did and told them I understood if they had concerns about their son marrying me. They responded 3 days later with a note saying they appreciated my honesty and directness. They said they looked forward to the rescheduled wedding and they believed my fiancé, and I were making the right choice by taking time for counseling. 3 weeks after the postponement, my fiancé surprised me by leaving coffee and a handwritten note on my apartment doorstep early one morning. I opened the door and found him standing on the sidewalk looking nervous. We had a brief conversation right there on the sidewalk where we both admitted we were doing better with the space, but we really missed each other. He said living separately was helping him see me more clearly, without all the wedding stress and family drama clouding everything. I told him the same thing and we agreed to keep taking things slow, but we both acknowledged the space was actually helping us figure out what we really wanted. He squeezed my hand before leaving and said he would see me at our next therapy session in 2 days. That weekend, we sat at my kitchen table with coffee and notebooks instead of wedding magazines. My fiancé pulled out a blank sheet of paper and wrote, "What we actually want," at the top, while I cleared away all the color swatches and venue photos we'd been obsessing over for months. We spent 3 hours talking about how we wanted to handle money disagreements, and what we'd do when one of us felt unheard, and how we'd support each other's careers without losing ourselves. He wrote down every commitment we made to each other in his careful handwriting, while I added notes in the margins about communication and honesty, and choosing each other even when things got hard. By the end, we had 2 pages of real promises that felt more important than any cake flavor or centerpiece decision we'd ever made. The list went on our fridge where we could see it every day instead of hidden in a wedding binder. 2 days later, I sat in the therapist's office and finally admitted out loud that I had a pattern of shutting down when emotions got too big or making stupid choices when I drank too much. The therapist asked me what I did instead of feeling my feelings, and I realized I either went numb and pretended everything was fine, or I got drunk and made everything worse. She gave me actual tools like writing things down before they built up and calling my fiancé when I felt overwhelmed instead of letting it fester. I told her about the live stream and how I'd been so scared of losing the excitement I had with Noah that I convinced myself stability meant settling. She helped me see that I'd confused drama with passion, and that real love could be both steady and exciting at the same time. I wasn't magically fixed after one session, and I knew I had a lot more work to do, but I felt honest for the first time in months. The relief of not pretending anymore was bigger than any wedding day fantasy I'd ever had. 4 weeks after we postponed the wedding, I woke up to my fiancé making coffee in our shared apartment kitchen because he'd moved back in the week before. We had therapy twice a month now, and we'd set clear boundaries with both our families about not interfering in our relationship. My social media was completely locked down with Drew's help, and I'd deleted the Instagram app from my phone entirely. We were planning a wedding for 50 people instead of 150, and we'd picked a venue that felt like us instead of trying to impress anyone. His parents sent us a care package last week with a note saying they were proud of us for doing the hard work, instead of rushing into marriage with unresolved problems. My sister was in her own therapy now working through her divorce trauma, and she'd backed off to appropriate distance after I held firm on my boundaries. Our new wedding date was circled on the calendar in red marker, and when I looked at it, I felt actual excitement instead of anxiety or dread. We still had hard conversations sometimes about money or future plans or family stuff, but they were real conversations where we both felt heard instead of one of us shutting down or exploding. I wasn't perfect, and neither was our relationship, but we were building something honest together. That felt like the right foundation for a marriage instead of just going through the motions because it was time or because everyone expected it. My fiancé squeezed my hand while we drank our coffee, and I squeezed back knowing I'd chosen him clearly this time. Every story's got a takeaway. This one's about owning your choices. If it helped you see something clearer, keep learning with me next time. Hit that bell.